these final responders and simply say, thank you.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Your Vote 2021. I'm Roderick Benz, publisher of the Lindsay Advocate, and I will be your moderator as we get set to learn more about your federal candidates. That's Jamie Schmale for the Conservative Party of Canada, Zach Miller of the New Democratic Party, Judy Forbes for the Liberal Party of Canada, and the Green Party candidate was invited but has withdrawn from the debate. Now, let's run down the rules for this debate. The order of first response was drawn today at 1 p.m. A representative of each campaign was welcome to witness the draw. There will be no opening statements. Each candidate has 2 minutes to answer each question. This debate will use a latchgate format. That means if a candidate references another candidate, party, leader, or platform of a party, the candidate mentioned will have a 30-second rebuttal opportunity. Once rebuttals are complete, the next candidate in order will have the opportunity to respond. Each candidate will have an opportunity to make their final remarks in reverse order of their opening responses. Final statements will be no longer than 3 minutes. An audible cue will be heard when there are 15 seconds left in statements and answers. The first question was designed for each individual candidate, and the debate will proceed from there to questions on health and well-being, economy and affordability, business, environment, Indigenous, and world issues, time dependent. With the rules out of the way, let's turn to our first question, which according to the random draw will be given to Zach Miller. Zach Miller, the NDP pledges to spend more than $200 billion, more than any other party in this election, and probably in our history. How is this much spending justified, and how will we ever balance the books, again, if your party is elected?
Thanks so much for the question. And to answer that, I would say that we really have to reorganize the way we think our economy works for us. Right now, we have an economy that works for large pharmaceutical companies while leaving working families and seniors unable to fill their prescriptions. And we also have an economy that works for large corporations and the wealthy, while leaving families and workers, seniors and students completely in the dust. So when you ask about our spending program, it's really about realigning our priorities. And we do have a robust way to pay for a lot of our social policy programs that we plan to implement, taxing the rich, corporations, introducing a wealth tax. This will produce $170 billion in revenue to offshore any new spending that we do. And you say we're going to spend $200 billion, and if we can raise $170 billion in new revenue, that will be only a $30 billion deficit. Actually much lower than the deficits that both the Conservatives and the Liberals are introducing in their platform for this election.
Thank you, Zach. Jamie Schmale, you came out and supported Aaron O'Toole early in the leadership race when he was running clearly to the right of the political spectrum, but now he's clearly running a campaign that is as centrist as Brian Mulroney's approach in the 80s and 90s. I'm sure viewers want to know, what version of conservatism are you most comfortable with?
Well, thank you very much for the question, and good afternoon to the viewers tuning into this debate. What we're campaigning on is low taxes, less government, more freedom. We're talking about restoring fiscal sanity to Ottawa. We're spending $424 million more per day than what you're taking in. Inflation came out today showing that August is the highest in almost 20 years, 4.1%. We're paying more for groceries, cars, housing, and fuel. We're impacting the ones on the lower end of the income scale as well as the lower middle class. That's an invisible tax you don't see. So what I'm campaigning on is, of course, not only restoring fiscal sanity to Ottawa, restoring accountability to Ottawa. We have seen what has been going on in Ottawa through one scandal after another. We're going to restore that with an anti-corruption law, probably the toughest Canada will see in its history. We thought the one we brought in under Stephen Harper in 2006 was the toughest. Sadly, we were proved wrong. We're going to invest in mental health, treat it as healthcare, where it should be treated in the first place. It was bad before the pandemic. It's gotten worse now. That includes a 3-digit national hotline where somebody that needs help will get help before something bad happens. All of this we can do in a responsible way, taking in the realities of the pandemic, but also ensuring that future generations aren't on the hook for the ongoing spending that is unsustainable.
Jamie, with respect to supplemental, what version of conservatism are you most comfortable with? Are you more comfortable with the label of a centrist or a fiscal conservative? That's what viewers would like to know.
Sure, absolutely. The Conservative Party of Canada is a big tent party. We have conservatives from all walks of life, all shapes and sizes, and we welcome them all. We welcome a diversity of thought within our caucus. We welcome differing opinions, and we have those tough conversations, and we welcome those conversations. So like I said, I'm running on low taxes, less government, more freedom. We want to see more money restored to the individual, to the taxpayer. We want to, as I mentioned, restore the fiscal sanity to Ottawa, restore accountability, and start looking at where we should be investing. And one of those areas I just mentioned, mental health.
Thank you very much. Judy Forbes. Canada has the worst public universal health care system in the world. That is, out of all the nations that provide universal health care, Canada offers the least amount of services that are free. Pharmacare is easily the most obvious missing piece of this puzzle and has been promised by the Liberals before, but never delivered upon. It also doesn't seem to be a big part of the latest Liberal budget. Why can't the Liberals get this done?
Thanks for that question, Roderick. I appreciate that. I just want to quickly respond to Jamie's question or comment about scandals in Ottawa. Stephen Harper was brought up on 70 different ethics charges while he was in Ottawa. So let's get on to healthcare. Canada's healthcare is a source of pride for so many Canadians, but many slip through the cracks. And nearly 5 million Canadians, unfortunately, have no access to healthcare. Unfortunately, with this pandemic, surgical wait lists are longer than ever, and people are lacking the resources. So I agree with you. We are having a tough time in Canada. We have promised to look at pharmacare, and we are working diligently towards that. We recently signed an agreement with Prince Edward Island to bring in pharmacare there as a test for the rest of the country. But as many people are aware, pharmacare falls under the provincial umbrella. So we have to work with the provinces in order to bring this through across Canada. And unlike some of my colleagues here, what we want to do is work with the provinces, but also work with private providers. So we know that there are corporations that pay for pharmaceuticals for their employees. So we don't want to lose those. We don't want to have that cost go on to the taxpayers' costs. So it's complicated. We're working on a system where we work with private insurance companies and with the provincial governments in order to bring pharmacare to life. Thank you.
Thank you, Judy. Jamie, I'm going to give you a 30-second rebuttal for the comments that Judy made.
Sure, absolutely. I find it shocking that we just had a book come out by Jody Wilson-Raybould titled Indian in the Cabinet, where she explains where she was asked to lie specifically by the Prime Minister. Not only that, she actually went so far as to say, I wish I had never met him. Also, Ms. Servan in Whitby has said she's voting Conservative, a former Liberal candidate that was forced out of the caucus by this Prime Minister. So we'll take no lessons from this Prime Minister on ethics.
Thank you, Jamie. Next round of questions.
That's pretty much a he said, she said. Jamie, the Prime Minister has...
So you agree that they're liars?
Has said that he never...
Do you agree with their liars?
I am still speaking.
But do you agree they're liars?
I am still speaking.
Do you agree they're liars?
I'm still
as long as you answer the
Okay,
question.
Jamie, let's give her
Thank you.
a few seconds.
The Prime Minister has said he never asked Jody Wilson-Raybould to lie. It's a he said, she said on that one. Thank you.
Okay. I would argue that if Jody Wilson-Raybould is going to be so far as to put those words into writing, she would be able to back that up, because that would be open to lawsuits if she was slandering the Prime Minister.
Well, she may be.
Thank you. Let's move on to the next question. Where does your party stand on mandatory vaccinations for federal public employees? Jamie, we'll start with you.
Sure, absolutely. I think we said that right at the beginning. Our policy was the same as the Liberals at the beginning. They unfortunately changed their policy, but it is, I'm double vaccinated, my leader's double vaccinated. We encourage Canadians to get the vaccine. We trust the vaccine and we believe in the vaccine. Having said that, this whole issue, this whole conversation has been unfortunately politicized to the point it doesn't really need to be. So for the public workforce, of course, as I just mentioned, we encourage they get vaccinated. If they can't, they will be subject to testing on a regular basis to ensure that they are not carrying or transmitting the virus. And again, this was the exact same policy the government had. Sadly, as the Prime Minister saw his poll numbers start to drop, that's where the old tactic of division comes in. East versus West, rich versus poor, and now it's vaccinated versus unvaccinated. So if his goal truly is to get the majority of Canadians vaccinated, stop politicizing this, stop pouring gasoline on this issue, and actually let's have a conversation to encourage those that do have concerns to get vaccinated.
Thank you. Zach Miller, could you jump in here on this one, please?
Perfect. And yeah, I do encourage everyone who can to get vaccinated. And I just don't want to tiptoe around this issue. Yes, I do support vaccine mandates, mainly because, 80% of those eligible to get the vaccinated or to get the vaccination are vaccinated. So we're talking about a group of people, small minority of people who are trying to push a debate, a culture war, so to speak, when there doesn't need to be one. Because we are potentially facing yet another shutdown, both schools, businesses. We're still wearing masks and we're still dealing with social distancing that, and all we want to do is visit our family and friends comfortably. And the three candidates here, we've done everything right. We did get vaccinated. We listened to scientific research. We listened to the doctor's advice. So there's this constant debate continuing about tyranny, freedom, rights. But the people who are losing their freedoms are the people who have been vaccinated. So we don't need to be dealing with these things anymore. We just don't. We don't need to be dealing with masks and social distancing if everyone just gets vaccinated. And if you don't get vaccinated, then you just lose your privilege to visit venues that have a high risk of passing on COVID. I mean, it's just that simple. Everyone should just get vaccinated, and then we can put this pandemic aside and return back to our lives as we knew them in 2019.
Thank you, Zach. Judy Forbes, where does your party stand on mandatory vaccinations for federal public employees?
Well, we are pushing through mandatory vaccinations for federal public employees, as well as those wishing to travel by air or rail. And it's to keep the public safe. We know the only way at this particular juncture to get through this in a safe way is to have everyone who can be fully vaccinated. So it's really to encourage folks to get fully vaccinated. Certainly if I was traveling by air or rail with one of my young grandchildren and I found out that someone sitting beside me had not been fully vaccinated, I would be concerned. I'd be terribly concerned. And I know others feel the same way. So we are absolutely pushing forward with mandatory vaccinations in certain cases. And we are also, not we, that would be me, me personally. I wouldn't be averse to looking at mandatory vaccinations for healthcare workers. My mother is in long-term care, and I want to make sure that the people who are caring for her and her colleagues there are well. So I think mandatory vaccinations are the way to go, and this federal government is also working with the provinces very closely in order to help them roll out vaccine credentials or vaccine passports. So,
thanks, Judy. I'm now giving you the opportunity to ask a question of your choice to any candidate of your choice.
Oh, we're doing that now. That's awesome. Okay, well, let me get my question. Mr. Schmale, Jamie, recently your party leader and you yourself have begun personal attacks on the Prime Minister. Your leader intimating because Trudeau comes from a more privileged life, he cannot appreciate the struggles of others, which is fully untrue. Justin Trudeau has dealt with an ambitious father, a bipolar mother, and the death of his younger brother. He fully appreciates human struggles. Mr. O'Toole likes to give the impression his family were auto workers when we know his father was a well-off provincial politician. And you have given misleading information on a number of topics, including the carbon tax and rebate program, Afghanistan, and recently called our Prime Minister a boy in a recent Facebook post. In an increasing climate of hostility, where my volunteer office team have been intimidated, I personally have been verbally assaulted, your leadership team has been aggressive towards my family and me, and we have seen the Prime Minister physically assaulted, how do you justify these Trumpian tactics?
Well, first of all, thank you for the question. Obviously, violence on any level is unacceptable, especially on the campaign level. As we try to attract more people to the political stage, we want to ensure that people are doing so safely. So I say to those people, cast your vote at the ballot box. There is no need for violence. It is utterly unacceptable, and I condemn every aspect of it. To your comment about the Facebook page, that was actually a quote from an article. If you had read the article, which I encourage you to do, actually was cut and paste from the article. You can talk to the author about that. The carbon tax. The Liberal carbon tax plan does not give back everything people spend because it does not count all the supply chain increases along the way. And also, even though there is a top up for rural areas, it does not cover the increased amount that is put on home heating fuel, on the cost of gasoline when people pre-pandemic used to drive to work. There are so many other costs that are calculated into the cost of the carbon tax that wasn't calculated into the carbon tax portfolio. The cost of the vehicle, transporting a good or a product to a store, that increase wasn't calculated. The cost that farmers use to dry their grains on wet seasons, that was not included. We as Conservatives actually put forward a private member's bill to take the section of the carbon tax off agricultural products on farm use.
Jamie, this question was not about the carbon tax.
Oh, yes, she did mention that. That she said I put misleading statements about the carbon tax.
Okay.
I was just correcting the record. Yes. But I can wrap up if you want, Chair.
Thank you. It's now time for a brief video from PPC candidate Allison Davidson. Stay tuned for more Your TV, Your Vote 2021.
I'm Allison Davidson. I am the People's Party candidate for the riding of Haliburton, Kawartha Lakes, Brock. So my husband and I own a small business. He builds log homes and timber frames, and I'm a cabinet maker. And we've worked hard for the last 20 years to build up our business to where we can finally start to feel a little comfortable. But the first 10, 15 years were super hard. And we started seeing other people, young people just starting their business, or maybe 5 years in, they've already put in all that struggle and just losing their business completely and everything they put into it. And we just thought, this isn't right. Children not being able to go to school, not being able to go play soccer, not being able to go swim at the beach. And it's just wrong. And so we really felt like we need to do something. And we can't do it alone. We all have to get together and vote out the Liberals and put in the PPC. They're the only party that is completely against all the lockdowns, all these mandates. So let's get back to work. Let's get back to school, and let's get things rolling again.
And we're back. Consider the increasing use of vaccination passports for our local and national economy. Let's find out where our candidates stand on this issue. Zach Miller.
So your question is relating to vaccine?
Specifically vaccine passports for our local and national economy. Are you in favor of them?
Well, yeah, vaccine passports, I've already said that I am in favor of them. I think, it's a privilege to go out into venue space that is that could be highly contagious to spread COVID-19. But the NDP platform does have a robust way for the government to actually help out main streets here in Haliburton, Kawartha Lakes, Brock. This continuing the wage subsidy that the NDP government actually forced the Liberals to enact in the first place in the early parts of the pandemic, as well as continuing rent subsidies so that businesses aren't forced to close because their landlords may be upping the rent. I think we have a strong platform for workers that protects them, and that also benefits small business because those were the businesses that were hurt the most during COVID-19.
Thank you. Judy, before you answer the same question, I'll give you 30-second rebuttal based on Zach's statement about your party.
Well, you know what? Zach and I are, if we are not exactly on the same page, we're certainly in the same book. We believe in helping people. We believe in helping businesses succeed. We believe in making sure individuals are taken care of. And so we welcome comments from the NDP and suggestions from the NDP in order to be better.
Okay, and what about
it's
vaccine?
also kind of insulting that we have a party who thinks we owe them their support and we owe them our ideas. No, they have to represent us. And what the NDP did was raise the wage subsidy from 10% of what the Liberals wanted to 75%. So you can thank the NDP for that. And I resent the idea of holding our leaders up as some kind of god, some kind of deity that we cannot touch. We elect representatives to represent us, not any party, any leader, and we certainly do not owe them any of our votes.
Thank you, Zach. Judy, I'll give you a chance to answer the question itself on vaccine passports for the local and national economy. Do you support those?
Yes, of course. I do support passports. We need to keep those of us who have taken responsibility safe. We need to keep those of us who are vulnerable safe. Certainly there are people out there who cannot get vaccines for medical reasons, and it's up to the rest of us who can to help keep them safe. So, for folks who do not want to get vaccinated, that's fine. It just means that whatever they decide to do, whether it's to travel by air or plane or visit a local restaurant, they may not be able to do that. Their freedom is not being impinged at all. It's just the consequence of the decision that they're making. So yes, I absolutely support them.
Thank you, Judy. Jamie, would you like to jump in on this issue of vaccine passports?
Sure, no problem. The idea of vaccine passports falls under provincial jurisdiction. The restrictions that you're seeing brought in Ontario are specific to Ontario. What you're seeing out west in provinces like British Columbia and Saskatchewan, Alberta, they vary on different levels. What we have said as a party is we will work with the provinces who have brought in a vaccine passport so that we are able to create a document that allows Canadians to travel. There are lots of countries that require a federal document for entry into their country. We had it prior to the pandemic. No matter where you go, you could go into parts of Africa. They've required a vaccine certificate by a federal authority that tested for things like yellow fever. This document would allow Canadians to travel, would satisfy international requirements, and hopefully get people back to life. But the idea of vaccine passports is under provincial jurisdiction.
Thanks, Jamie. We're starting to see a lot of signs outside of local businesses that read hiring. In some cases, businesses have had to shut down due to staff shortages. What can be done federally to help improve the skilled workforce in this region? Judy Forbes.
Thank you for that, Roderick. We have a lot of training programs that we are putting forward. Certainly, and I've heard it, probably many others have heard it. When I'm going door to door, people say, well, because of CERB, people aren't coming back to work. But that is not true. Because of CERB or CRB now, people have the opportunity to possibly look for more meaningful work for them, possibly follow their dreams. So that's great. And CERB has actually shown us that something like universal basic income could work effectively in this country. So because of that, some businesses have had shortages of workers, and that is unfortunate. Sometimes the healthcare sector is one of them where we have shortages of personal support workers. So the federal government will be hiring 50,000 new personal support workers and raising their income to $25 an hour. But we're also bringing forward many programs to help people learn new trades or learn trades in the green economy in order to find work going forward in new green businesses that hopefully we can bring to this riding.
Thank you, Judy. Zach Miller, what can be done federally to help improve the skilled workforce in the region?
That's a great question. And like I've mentioned previously, the federal government would continue the wage subsidy and the rent subsidy for businesses, keeping more money into their pockets so that they can expand their businesses or they can even pay their workers more. We don't have a labor shortage here in Canada. We have a wage shortage, and the CERB really showed and set precedent on what our basic needs, what our basic amount of money to meet our needs are. And I don't agree with calling workers lazy for taking CERB or taking time off to find a new job and level up and increase their comfortability in their lives. So I think in order to have a strong economy, both locally and federally, we need to have workers supported, workers healthy with a national pharmacare and dental care program that's not paid for by businesses so that they can continue the jobs that they want to do. We don't, minimum wage workers that we see a lot of the times are not lazy. They just don't get a lot of, they have to do a lot of work for very little. So I think it's time that we start respecting that work and also making sure that our businesses have the supports that they need so that they can stay open and thrive.
Thanks, Zach. Jamie, what can be done federally to help with skilled workforce in our region?
Sure, absolutely. So our plan focuses on getting people back to work. We're safe and responsible for do so. The one part of our plan after the wage subsidy phases out is to pay 25% of the wages of new hires for businesses able to do so. For those individuals who have been off work for 6 months or longer, we have committed to paying 50% of the wage of those new hires. Again, allowing businesses to hire. With more businesses come more opportunity and more wealth creation. We also want to ensure that the main streets, what our riding is made up of, remain strong. The GST holiday in the month of December, dollars spent in the main streets, on the bricks and mortar stores, those consumers will see the GST taken off their purchases. Away from the e-commerce sites that have done, sadly, extremely well during this pandemic, we want to bring it back to the downtown stores and ensure that they are healthy. On the other side, when you're talking about skilled labor, of course, we have a shortage in the skilled trades. I think a lot of that has to do with work with the provinces and the school boards themselves so that they are encouraging people to look into areas where there is a severe job shortage, such as the skilled trades. We have people in Haliburton County, Kawartha Lakes, wherever, that are begging for people with that knowledge, with that skill set, and they can't find them, which is putting delays on projects, but also increasing the cost for some of these projects. So I think it's a collaborative approach on that because the federal government can't do all of that because it isn't in their jurisdiction, education as the provinces, but working with them and the school boards to kind of change the conversation is, I think, a direction we need to head.
Thanks, Jamie. Zach Miller, you may now ask a question to either the Conservative candidate or the Liberal candidate.
Perfect. So my question will be to Ms. Forbes here. Throughout the campaign over the last 3 weeks, I've been hearing at the doors and phone calls and emails from our constituents worried about their financial supports, mainly from seniors 65 to age 74. And a lot of the worry comes from the federal government recently giving out a $500 increase to the GIS, but it left out seniors who are age 65 to 74. So why did your government leave out those seniors and not think that they needed that money? And why do you think an increase of just $500 a year will substantially improve the lives of seniors age 65 plus in our community?
Well, thanks for that, Zach. The Liberal government has done more for seniors than any other previous government. When we took over in 2015, we lowered the old age security age from 67 to 65, lifting millions of seniors out of poverty. Since then, we have increased Canada Pension Plan, we've increased old age security, we've increased the guaranteed income supplement, and we continue to watch our seniors. The reason to answer your question, Zach, and thanks for that, the reason that we have provided a little bit extra money for our seniors over 75 is because over 75, people start to have increased costs. So they may have increased health costs or maybe increased support worker costs or that sort of thing. So, we're trying to help them and get those people taken care of. The other thing that we did when we first took over was veterans. We were and many of our veterans are seniors. And we helped a lot of our veterans out of poverty. We opened up Veterans Affairs offices that were closed with the previous government, and we increased their pensions in order to raise them out of poverty. So our focus has been on seniors and helping seniors. And certainly I will be keeping a pretty close eye on what our government is doing for seniors. So thanks.
Well, I would just like to say that you didn't actually really answer the question or address why you left out seniors age 65 to 74. What it sounded like you said was that they don't have problems, that they've worked their entire lives, retired at 65, did everything right, but now they can't get the supports that they need from the government.
That's not true. So
well, it is true. It is true. The GIS.
Hey, it's my turn.
I know,
to
but
talk.
the GIS was only increased for those 75
I was
plus.
talking. It is
Judy,
hard as a woman to get a word in on these two. Anyway, so when we took over, we did increase the OAS, we did increase the GIS, we did increase the CPP for everyone, but realizing that seniors over 75 have additional costs, we bumped those up. So that's typically where the highest expenses start.
Thank you, Judy. Let's move on to the opioid crisis. It's a real concern at the local level. What supports will your party put in place to help ease the burden on local police forces and municipalities? Jamie, let's start with you.
Sure. Thank you for that question. I think there isn't a community across Canada that has been void of this problem. I think many of us watching, maybe even in this room, have had stories or family members that have been affected by this crisis. Our plan, working with the provinces and municipalities, not only dealing with the addiction, but also the treatment, trying to get people off their addiction, and working with those partners to provide those spaces so people can return to normal life, stop this addictive process, stop this spiral, often into worse situations. It is heartbreaking to watch because it can start very innocently and go into places we don't even want to talk about. So let's work together and not only identify, but also treat and ensure that those spaces are there for the people that need it. The other part is the mental health support, treating it like healthcare, ensuring there's a 3-digit national hotline, and ensuring that mental health really does get the space in healthcare that it probably, I think we all agree, needed before the pandemic and definitely needs now.
Thank you, Jamie. Judy Forbes, can you speak to the opioid crisis at a local level and how your party can help?
Yeah. The opioid crisis is a real crisis across Canada. Since 2016, there have been over 9,000 opioid-created deaths in this country. And it's not a big city issue. It is happening right here in our communities and in our towns. And people who are addicted to opioids also have other problems. As Jamie mentioned, they may have mental health issues, housing issues, food insecurity, working more than one job, social isolation. It's devastating for friends and families. So we need to support our frontline staff to provide them with the ability to counter overdose by equipping police and fire and social and mental health works with the support that they need. We need to end the stigma attached to opioid addiction, and mental health. And although this is primarily a provincial responsibility, this government has set aside $5 billion in mental health care funding for the provinces for the first time in order to support our communities, and an additional $75 million in new funding to take immediate and targeted action to scale up key life-saving measures to address opioids, mitigate the impacts of illegal drug supply, and address the increasing use of methamphetamines. That is a long word. And I can promise that I will always work with people who want to come to me with solutions on this. I will work with people who'd like to take this forward in a meaningful way.
Thanks, Judy. Zach Miller, how can we deal with this opioid crisis at the local level?
Yeah, so a lot of us know folks in our riding who have struggled with addiction and possible OD from drugs, and it's only worsened with the effects of COVID-19 for our friends and families who struggle. So what we need to do is we have to treat these folks, treat these individuals, our neighbors, as human beings, and we should not be treating them as criminals in a mindset or in the media or by a government, and the stigma that it is drug addiction. So we need to work with our provincial and municipal governments, as well as health professionals, to create a safe supply of medically safe alternatives to drugs that are on the street, and support overdose prevention sites, and expand the access that those with addictions have to those services. And we would also like to launch a formal investigation into large corporations, into large pharmaceutical companies that have profited off the opioid crisis, and they should be held accountable to the cost that it is to help these folks that are addicted to opioids. I think this plan is robust. I think it's moral. I think we treat those affected by drug addiction with compassion, and not just another number and a talking point.
Thank you, Zach. It's now time for a brief video from Libertarian candidate Jean Balfour. Stay tuned for more Your Vote 2021.
Hello, everybody. My name is Jean Balfour, and I'm the Libertarian candidate in this election, and I'm advocating for less government. For a long time now, about 15 years, I have believed that we've had far too much government in our lives, not just at the federal level, but at the provincial and the municipal level as well. And the reason why I believe that is because I've watched over the last 5 decades since I was able to vote, the size and scope and cost of our government continue to rise, and it continues to rise unabated. It doesn't seem like there's anything really to stop it. And I believe that the only way it can be stopped is if all of us collectively look at the situations, the costs and the overheads that we are expected to live with under these increasingly large governments. The primary culprits for these are the Liberals, the NDP, and the Green Party. All you have to do is look at their policies, and you can see that there's no way that they can possibly pay for them. It's not that they'll pay for them, of course, it'll be us that will pay for it. So I'm not looking for votes. I know I won't get elected. That's not my consideration here. All I'm really trying to do is trying to introduce to you, to the voting public, the idea is that maybe we should be, at this time, maybe we should be looking very seriously at whether or not The government should be reduced, not increased in size. That taxes should be reduced, not increased. That regulations and laws should be reduced, not expanded indefinitely as they have been up to this point. So please, in this election, rather than necessarily voting for me, that's not what I want necessarily, but what I'd rather see is that you vote for any politician that is committed to reducing the size and the cost and the scope of government. And right now, I believe those politicians are on the political right, in the Conservatives, and even more importantly, in the PPC under Maxime Bernier. Thanks for listening to me.
We are your TV. Connect with us. Your TV, truly local.
The campaign is underway. Your riding, your ballot, your decision. Join us for the latest local information leading up to Election Day. Your vote, your TV, exclusively on Cocheco.
Our son is one.
My father was one.
I am one.
Are you one?
It's been a while since I've seen Joe. We were a couple of pranksters, and Joe was always full of surprises. But today, he's the one in for a surprise.
The thing is, Joe doesn't live here anymore. For people living with dementia, getting lost can happen unexpectedly. Are you ready to help? Help people living with dementia live safely in our communities. Contact your local Alzheimer's Society and visit findingyourwayontario.ca.
The campaign is underway. Your riding, your ballot, your decision. Your vote, your TV, exclusively on Cocheco. Community is at the heart of what we do. In Peterborough and Lindsay, we are your TV, truly local.
Hi, everyone. Welcome back to Your Vote 2021. Jamie Schmale, we're going to give you the opportunity now to ask a question to the candidate of your choice.
Okay, perfect. Thank you very much, Chair. And maybe I'll just quickly throw one to Zach if I could. But before I do, I just want to mention that when Zach was talking about the wage subsidy being increased upwards of 70%, it was the NDP and the Conservatives pushing for that. It actually was a great team effort in the House to watch that happen. So Zach, in 2011, the NDP formed a very solid opposition to the then Conservative government led by Stephen Harper. At that point, under the leadership, sadly under Jack Layton and then under Thomas Mulcair, you were able to develop a solid policy and a solid opposition. You could tell the difference between the two sides of that debate. I've had the fortune of talking to some NDP MPs who often get quite frustrated the fact that the Prime Minister talks the progressive talk, but doesn't actually walk the progressive walk. And that seems to be a common frustration through NDP, I think, members throughout the country. You take our platform, but you don't actually implement it. Does that add to some frustration on your part when you see the Prime Minister on and on again trying to scare voters away from your party when you are actually the party that will implement that progressive agenda?
For sure. I mean, it's always frustrating to listen to the Prime Minister talk the talk, but actually not give any cares when it comes time to implementing, i.e. calling an election rather than working with all parties to implement much needed social reforms that we do. But we are the only party in Parliament Hill that is on the side of workers, working families, and for the most part, businesses and seniors. We are the ones advocating for increases. We're the ones advocating for higher wages. So yeah, I mean, the Liberals let us down continually, of course. It's how it is, but also conservative governments let us down always as well. I mean, we, for the last 3 decades, our economy has switched to favor the Ottawa elite and the bubble that exists, and the Conservative Party is part of that too, for sure. So we really need to rework the system that we created. I mean, we created the system. Why can't we rework it to work for ordinary individuals here in Haliburton, Kawartha, Lakes Brock? So yeah, I think the NDP is the party on the side of the workers, is the party that is robustly advocating for social reforms such as pharmacare and dental care and higher wages for the workers here in Haliburton, Kawartha, Lakes Brock.
Judy, I'll give you 30 seconds to jump in there.
So you mentioned the election. Certainly Jagmeet Singh was out campaigning and urging people to vote before we had vaccines in the BC election. So your comment seems a little bit spurious on that. And the Liberal Party has to look at what can we move forward with. Certainly ideas that come from the NDP are great, but we have to figure out how we're going to get there. We have to have a plan. We can't just rely on magic.
Well, it's not magic. It's a plan that is for everybody and not the elite, that your platform literally represents.
Our platform does not represent
100%. Well, then
the
don't
elite.
call an election. Don't call an election and work with other parties.
Do we want to talk about calling an election? Is that where we want to go?
Your party called an election when we could have worked with the Conservative Party or the NDP to implement a COVID recovery plan that would have benefited everybody else. But your leader, your party, your caucus had their self-interests ahead of everybody else to gain a minority. And you know what's going to backfire on them.
We did call an election because it was the right time to call an election.
Yeah.
It was never in the history, in most of our recent history, since 1945, have we had an emergency situation, a crisis situation in this country. And we have to figure out how to move forward.
Thanks, Judy. Let's move to Jamie. His party was referenced several times there.
Okay. Sure, perfect. I just want to disagree with my friend in red. This is not the right time to call an election. I do not think it was the right time. Zach is right. The Liberal Party did not lose confidence of the House of Commons. The NDP and the Bloc supported the Liberals through most of the pandemic. There was no chance of the House folding. I'll also address Zach's comments maybe in a little later segment if I could.
Okay, will do. Mental health is a subject that gets a lot of attention. It was referenced earlier from all parties. But what concrete plan for mental health beyond the opioid crisis does your party have to help prioritize it over the next 4 years? Judy, let's start with you.
Give me half a second. I just want to get the right details for you on mental health.
Well, Zach Miller, let's start with you.
Okay, perfect. So again, mental health is such an important issue that affects many individuals in our riding, especially youth among us. So the federal government needs to do more, increasing federal transfers to provincial governments in order for them to, establish a new mental health protocols and clinics and supports for our people in the riding. And, oftentimes things go undiagnosed, unchecked, untalked about. We have eating disorders amongst females, but also amongst male individuals here. And that needs to be addressed as well, and making sure that there is no discrimination when it comes to mental health, but also making sure that they have access to mental health supports whenever they need them. We have a provincial Conservative government who prefer to continue with standardized testing when that money, that $40 million that it takes to administer a failed test to grade 3s, 6, and 9s, and reinvest that to hire new mental health supports in every high school in the country. We need a strong advocate in Queen's Park to not only advocate for federal issues, but to push our provincial leaders and to push our terribly regressive municipality here in Kawartha Lakes to do more for individuals who suffer with mental health problems.
Thank you, Zach. We'll go to Judy now.
Thanks, Roderick. Thanks for your patience. So since 2015, we've worked with the provinces and the territories to support Canadians' mental health. And we were there for Canadians. So the Liberal team moved quickly after COVID-19 to make sure that there was virtual mental health support and a free wellness portal. So we could help more than 1 million Canadians. We supported mental health and wellness strategy in First Nations, Inuit and Métis communities for residential school survivors and more. And we supported veterans' mental health to help cover costs related to PTSD. And a re-elected Liberal government will continue to support mental health with Canadians by providing permanent, ongoing funding for mental health services through a new Canadian mental health transfer to provinces and territories to deliver high-quality, accessible, and free mental health services to more Canadians. We're going to introduce a new fund for students because students suffer greatly from mental health issues by hiring 1,200 new counselors at colleges and universities. And we're going to establish a 3-digit mental health crisis hotline for people who are in crisis, and develop mental health and wellness strategy for First Nations, Inuit, and Métis partners. Other parties want to cut back on mental health services. We do not. We do not. We fully support Canadians and helping them through mental health issues that they have. Thank you.
Thanks, Judy. Jamie Schmel, where does your party stand on mental health over the next 4 years?
Perfect. Thank you. I think we touched on a lot of it already, talking about treating mental health into the healthcare sphere. We talked about the crisis before the pandemic. It's gotten worse now. Let's fund it accordingly and treat it as it should be, as healthcare. Also, that 3-digit national hotline we mentioned earlier, that was a Conservative member of Parliament with his motion that passed unanimously in the House that will hopefully allow people, when they dial that number, to get the help they need in the time they need so that bad things don't happen. That kind of wraps up that part. If I don't mind, I just want to quickly talk about about the party of the elites. I respectfully disagree on that. When you're talking about low government, less government, that's less influence the lawyers and lobbyists have over any government. I think where you look where Conservatives do well, and that's in rural areas. I don't think there's too many elites in rural areas. When our platform talks about the small businesses, taking hopefully business away from some of the e-commerce sites that many people have been pushed to during this pandemic and bringing it back to the local level. When it talks about ensuring that there are no barriers to competition for that the small business can come up with an idea or product, a service they want to provide and have the opportunity to grow that. What usually happens, because in Canada we have very few supports for small to medium jump businesses, is to provide that support for those businesses. Because usually what happens, because there is no small to medium, those companies just sell out usually to larger corporations, and that talent, those jobs aren't realized, and that's unfortunate. So where our plan talks about removing those barriers, stop the top-down approach, allowing people at the local level to grow.
Thanks, Jamie. I'll give you 30 seconds if you wish to speak to that.
Yeah, over the history of the country, 40 years now, we've had both Liberal and Conservative governments who've continued to let us down. And it's not that you yourself represent the elites, even in Haliburton, Kawartha Lakes, Brock. It's that your entire infrastructure around your party, both the Liberal and the Conservative Party, is operated around a sphere that is of private interest, that is not of the public's concern. So no, I think that the only party is the NDP that supports workers and will ignore private interests and that sphere that both the other parties listen to.
Judy, your party was referenced there?
Yeah, I'm shocked that Zach thinks that we do not have the public concern in our sights. When COVID began, we worked tirelessly to secure vaccines, to get them into this country in order to help the entire country get through this terrible pandemic. And we had enough to bring in enough vaccines to fully vaccinate everyone in Canada 2 months ahead of schedule.
Thanks, Judy. And speaking of that pandemic, people are tired of it. Canadians want to know what the long-term plan is for dealing with COVID-19. If elected, what approach will your party take to balance the well-being of the economy and the safety of all the residents in your riding? Zach Miller.
So I would address this as a complete multifaceted approach. It's not one single policy that's going to get this done. It's about supporting everybody here in our community so that they're supported and that they're supporting the businesses in their recovery out of COVID-19. An issue that we haven't touched on was long-term care. This is a giant problem that was exposed because of COVID, not because of it, not like because of COVID, but it exposed the systemic nature that is long-term care. And coming out of COVID-19, we need a government that knows how to handle it, that listens to the grieving families of their mothers and fathers or brothers and sisters who've passed away out of neglect, out of these long-term care homes. So I think it's about priorities and making sure that we're there for folks and have those supports such as housing and pharmacare, dental care, and making sure that they're supported so that they're healthy to go to work and that they're living a productive life, making more money so that they can put it back into the economy. And I think that's really the crux of what it is. It's not a single issue, it's a whole policy wrapped up to really force us into the next couple decades.
Thanks, Zach. Jamie Schmill, well-being of the economy, well-being of the residents. How does your party deal with that?
Perfect. Thank you. And I agree with Zach. It isn't just a one answer approach or a very narrow approach. It's a very wide approach. And that's why our priorities focus on the economy, cleaning up the mess in Ottawa, and also protecting the public. Working with the provinces to ensure that there are supports there, as we mentioned, for mental health a few times in this discussion. We're going to increase healthcare transfers to the provinces. It's currently at 3%. We're going to bring it up to 6%. That represents about a $60 billion increase over 10 years. More money for the provinces to direct in areas that they believe they need that help in. And I think during this pandemic, we've seen that provinces are stretched to the limit. So we want to relieve some of that pressure at the federal level and encourage flexibility and predictability so that the provincial governments have that ability to do so. Also, when you talk about protecting the future, we want to ensure that we balance the budget in 10 years or less. There's a responsible plan to do so, to get our finances under control so that we don't continue to print money and devalue our dollar. Inflation went up to 4.1% in August. That's the highest in 20 years. This is not a very safe path we're taking, and we need to bring that back, or else those on the lower end of the income scale, those on the lower middle class, are going to be hurt the most because you're going to see the cost of everything. Food, vehicles, fuel, all going up, and housing, all going up at a level that's becoming rapidly unaffordable for many Canadians. So I think you can do it all, but there's a responsible and a very clear path for that.
Judy Forbes, how does your party balance well-being of the economy and well-being of people?
Thank you. So we need to finish this fight against COVID. That is job number one. We cannot go anywhere until we get through this. We cannot go anywhere substantially, economically, until we finish this fight. And the only way to finish this fight is to get vaccines into the arms of Canadians. And so far, approximately 80% of Canadians are fully vaccinated, which is fabulous. It is wonderful, and I'm glad that they have stepped up. But once we have got on that road to recovery, we really need to focus on small business and small business communities. So I live in a small town. I don't live in Lindsay. I live outside of Lindsay in a little town called Beaverton, and we are a town with no stoplights. And there are many towns just like that in this riding, and I have knocked on doors in many of them, and a lot of those businesses, a lot of those small businesses have been hurting, even though they've been subsidized with wage subsidy or other small business supports in order to help them survive through this. But we need to do more for them. We need to help them grow and recover. We need to continue to provide support for them and for their workers, and this government will.
Thanks, Judy. The next question comes your way, courtesy of the Poverty Reduction Roundtable. About 60% of all food insecure households in Canada have employment as their main source of income, but many jobs simply do not pay enough to cover the costs of living. A guaranteed basic income would address income insecurity for all sectors of the population. How will you support some kind of basic income guarantee for working age Canadians? Jamie.
Perfect. Thank you very much. That's a very interesting question. I think we've talked about it, I think, every debate, and very robust conversations in between. I think the real piece of this puzzle is jobs and economic activity. As you mentioned, the cost of food has become rapidly inexpensive for many Canadians. You're seeing food banks with increased usage. We have seen the price of food go up during this pandemic at a rate that is quickly becoming unaffordable. I think all of us here goes to the grocery store and we know how much our money will buy. It's not the same amount. We need to safely get people back to work where possible, create these economic opportunities, but also ensure that small businesses, which our towns in this riding are the heartbeat of, are able to hire people, are able to reach that next level. As mentioned, talked about the GST holiday in December, taking GST off purchases made specifically on the main street, the bricks and mortar stores, not the big box stores, not e-commerce sites. Also talking about the dine-in program, where the government, after the first few months of a provincial government saying it's safe to do so and dine-in is allowed, will pay 50% of the cost of meals and non-alcoholic beverages, trying to get people back into these businesses that are then able to hire and create jobs and opportunity. But at the end of the day, we want people to be safe, but when businesses are thriving, when there is more jobs than there are people to work in those positions, wages go up organically. They have to. The businesses will not be able to hold on to people. We need to have the economy strong, hiring, and thriving, and our plan addresses that.
Supplemental question, Jamie. Sure. The problem with the job economy right now was referenced in the question, the gig economy. Mm-hmm. So many jobs just simply aren't paying a living wage. Conservatives like Hugh Segal have been fighting for basic income all his life, and Brian Mulroney actually has spoken out recently that we should at least be trying a pilot. Would you be in favor of a pilot to test it?
Well, as we spoke many times, Milton Freeman, of course, the basic income. I guess the conversation also has to take place. What does that entail, right? There are different forms of basic income. Are we talking about only on the federal level and provincial programs? Are we talking about provincial programs and a national basic income? Are we talking about a basic income and then we kind of disperse the federal service? I think there are conversations to talk about how that works and discuss how the pilot.
So it's possible.
It's possible. I want to know the mechanics of it first before I commit one way or the other.
Judy Forbes, let's turn that question to you. How will you support some kind of basic income guarantee for working age Canadians?
Yeah. Thanks, Roderick. Well, you know what? As of 2019, this Liberal government's investments have helped lift 825,000 Canadians out of poverty through the Canada Child Benefit, through reducing old age security from 67 to 65, increasing the guaranteed income supplement by 10%, providing one-time payment to seniors over 75, and the list goes on and on and on. But you asked me specifically about universal basic income, and I'm a fan. I am a fan of universal basic income, and so are many Liberal members of Parliament, probably I don't know, but probably NDP members of Parliament as well. And that notion is bubbling up in Parliament. And I have seen Liberal MPs starting to push that forward. And I think it's something that could work really effectively in Canada. We've seen how effectively it can work with the CERB program. It allowed people to go back to school. It bridges people from one job to another. It helps people who may be disabled for a short period of time. And when the pilot ran in Lindsay under the provincial Liberal government, it was hugely successful until it was shut down by the Ford Conservative government. So universal basic income can help. It can help with pay and equity, but there's more that has to be done. It's not just universal basic income. There needs to be total health care. Pharmacare and dental care need to be attached to that. We need to close a lot of the tax loopholes. We need to have working tax benefits, and we need to address economic racism as part of all this.
Thank you, Judy. So as MP, if you were elected MP, you would personally push for basic income within your party?
I would.
Okay, thank you. Zach Miller?
So yeah, I'm a strong advocate of a basic income, especially for those that need it most, folks living with disabilities, as well as seniors age 65 plus who were left out of the Liberals' guaranteed supplement increase. But it's interesting that you both, that Roderick and Jamie mentioned Brown Mulroney, Milton Friedman. Understand that if we put a basic income in, it has to be with an asterisk. It has to keep in the social safety nets that we do have currently in place. OAS, GIS, they need to stay in there. We need to advocate for the provincial governments to mandate that they leave in, here in Ontario, OW and ODSP. Because the reason why these Conservatives and Liberals, let's be honest, support a basic income is because that's their way of cutting the social safety net that they have been advocating to do over and over and over again. We look in Ontario, Kathleen Wynne cutting ODSP and OW rates, but advocating for a basic income. It's to replace it, and then in successive governments of Conservative and Liberal, they will continue to cut the basic income until we have nothing left. That's why Brian Mulroney and that's why Milton Friedman support a basic income. So I do support it, but it has to keep intact the social safety nets that we have here in Canada and every province within. And I think that's a big difference between a Liberal and an NDP. We care about the supports we give, and we want to continue to build up our country and make sure that we have supports there for working families and not leave them in the dust, much like the Liberals will do if they implement a basic income.
Zach, supplemental, you commented that you support a basic income strongly for those who need it most. So that doesn't sound like an unconditional basic income.
No, so when an NDP government does roll out the basic income, it does take a while to get those checks out. So the very first people who would receive it are folks living with disabilities and seniors age 65 plus, because those are the people that really need it most. I mean, we have some seniors living on $1,800 a month, and that's absolutely negligible on the part of the government. So once it's rolled out to seniors and folks living with disability, then it would be offered to every other Canadian who lives in the country.
Interesting. Okay, I'll give you both 30 seconds. Zach referenced both of your parties. To you first, Jamie.
Oh, what question? Sorry.
Zach had mentioned your party with regard to basic income or with regard to cuts.
Okay, sure. Look, if what the NDP is proposing is basic income plus everything else, both the provincial government, every provincial government in this country, and the federal government are currently running on the credit card right now. All of them. Newfoundland is in dire straits right now. We continue to spend $424 million, more than what we're taking in already. To add even more to that would put this country on a very dangerous path financially. Inflation's hit, 4.1%, the highest in 20 years. It's only going to get worse.
But that's the party that's not implementing new revenue streams. The NDP, yes, is proposing robust programs that will cost $200 billion, but we also have new tax increases to the very wealthy, to the tippy top. The ones that we never see, they will be paying more, and that's how we will offset any increase in social spending. And it's the deficit that the NDP is proposing, which has been looked at by the PBO, is lower than both the Conservatives and the Liberals' platforms for this election.
Judy Forbes.
It hasn't been proven that the increase to the top 1% would actually cover this, but on the Liberal position on universal basic income, I agree with Zach in many ways. I think there needs to be a base, but there also needs to be modifications for certain groups who will slip through the cracks, like racialized single mothers and like people with disabilities. So I would agree with that.
All parties have outlined their plans to address the housing crisis. However, given the likelihood of reaching these goals in one term, we ask each candidate, what are your party's immediate strategies for those who are in the greatest need of safe, affordable housing? So we're not talking about the middle class here. For those in the greatest need, Zach.
So there is many different ways that we can handle the housing crisis. And I support three proposals. One, fix the supply issue. That means building 1.7 million homes of mixed types, mid-rises, apartments, and townhomes, and detached or tiny homes if folks want to live in a tiny home in that lifestyle. And 500,000 of those will be affordable style and affordable rent for anybody who wants to buy them. But an also prong that we must acknowledge that has failed us is the government actually building these homes. The Canada Housing and the Canada Mortgage and Housing Corporation has been cut by the Conservative and the Liberal government. So we need to rework the CMHC so that money is given directly to municipalities like Haliburton County, Brock Township, Kawartha Lakes that desperately needs the money to meet their growth targets over the next 10 years. And another prong, aside from fixing the supply as well as reworking the CMHC to better our municipalities, is to look at the Bank of Canada's role in its purpose of raising the prices of homes around the country. I mean, the amount of money that they spent in buying mortgage-backed securities from banks, no doubt increased the prices of houses around this country. So I think we need shovels in the ground immediately, and we can't let a government give all our money to private LLCs, private developers who just take in that money and then never build a home. The Liberals' national housing strategy, 40% of the money that was doled out goes to pay interest on it, and the rest goes to developers, and a very, very small part of that money goes into actually building homes. And the government used to do it. We see here in Lindsay, Victory Homes after the Second World War. We see the homes built on Howard Avenue. That was because the government gave direct funding to the town of Lindsay in the former Victoria County. And I think that can be done again.
Thank you, Zach. I'll give you 30 seconds to respond to that, Judy.
Sorry, there was so much information there. The Liberal government does have a robust housing plan. I am not privy to the data that Zach is bringing forward, but the Liberals have probably the most robust housing plan of any of the parties standing here today.
Okay, we'll come back to you on this question. Jamie, please stick to, for those who are in the greatest need of safe, affordable housing, because we will be talking about housing for the middle class.
Oh, really? Okay, perfect. Okay, I agree with Zach on a few issues. I'll get to what I agree with him in a second. We're going to talk about building 1 million homes within the first few years. This issue right now is the supply issue. We don't have enough, and we need to get some shovels in the ground, which I agree with Zach on 100%. The federal government also has one of the largest real estate portfolios in the country, 37,000 buildings. We're going to look at that inventory and find out how much we can release to make into low-income housing. We think a minimum of 15% is a fair number. We could go higher, but that's our benchmark target to identify those and get them converted into housing ASAP so that we are able to meet that demand that is coming. I won't go to the middle class one, but let's talk about the small homes, because Zach did bring it up, and it's actually a very good point. Up until recently, it's been near impossible for developers to build a small home because of the red tape, the regulations, the rules put on every level of government, provincial and municipal. So that's why it drives me absolutely bonkers when I read about some European town that's been able to help their homeless issue because they were able to build small homes, but yet we can't do it here in Canada because we have bureaucracy ourselves to death. That's even a word. It probably isn't. But you get my point. So we want to get rid of that. We saw during the pandemic, a carpenter in Toronto started to build small homes because he was tired of watching the people just living on the street. Who shut him down? The municipality. Why? The municipality wasn't doing it. But we have created all these barriers to people doing the entrepreneurial thing by creating those small homes or allowing municipalities the flexibility to do that. And they haven't had that opportunity to do that. So stuff like that would help. We just need to start building and stop over-regulating.
Thanks, Jamie. Judy Forbes?
Well, simply because I was mentioned just very briefly.
Okay, 30 seconds.
The Conservatives aren't offering anything new to actually build those homes. They're still relying on the private corporations and the developers and the offshore LLCs to do the work. It's proven that they haven't actually done that because we're in the crisis that we are today. They're not looking at the CMHC that will actually increase the federal funding that comes to our municipalities. Kawartha Lakes, one of the largest geographic regions, but the most stressed in terms of its tax base. They need more money from the federal government, and the NDP government and myself will advocate for that.
Thanks, Zach. Judy Forbes, your party's plan
for
those who are in the greatest need of affordable housing.
Thank you. Well, we want to do three things. We want to unlock home ownership, we want to build more homes, and we want to protect the rights of homeowners. So the Liberals will build 1.4 million homes in the next 4 years. We're the only party with a plan to end chronic homelessness. And some of the things that we are going to do, we're introducing a rent-to-own program so that people can buy into home ownership. We're helping Canadians under 40 save up to $40,000 for their first home, tax-free. We are improving the first-time home buyers incentive. We're reducing closing costs on mortgages, temporarily banning foreign ownership, foreign speculation on homes. With those 1.4 million homes, 30% more than any other party, we are speeding up construction to grow our supply and make more homes. We're going to build and repair more affordable housing. We're looking at office space in order to convert to housing, and we want to help multiple generations of families live together. So they will be you could renovate your basement so that your kids can move in or your folks could move in, which would be great. We also want to protect the buyers of the home with a Bill of Rights to stop blind bidding and stop renovictions. I had a woman come into our office yesterday. She had recently lost her job. Her landlord was saying that they were going to renovate the building that she was in, and she was getting evicted from this home. We need to stop that practice. It's just not right. And we want to crack down on home flipping by taxing appropriately. I want to make it clear the Liberals have no plan to tax principal residences. It would be the kiss of death for any party to tax your principal residence.
Thank you, Judy. Thank you. All right, we're going to take a break now. Great conversation. We'll be back soon with Your Vote 2021.
We are your TV. Connect with us. Your TV, truly local.
Hi, I'm Sue Mazziotti Armitage, Client Care Coordinator of the Society of St. Vincent de Paul. Vinny's Feel Good Shopping. We're proud to be part of a caring, helping community. You're watching Your TV Peterborough, truly local.
Hi, I'm four-time world curling champion Glenn Howard. On my rink, we have one rule on the ice: work together as a team. Off the ice, your road safety team works together too. The front end's goal is to keep our roads safe with responsible sales, service, and behavior. The back end ensures that our legislation, enforcement, and campaigning are effective. Thanks for playing your part in keeping Ontario's roads amongst the safest in North America. Visit arrivealive.org to find out more. Arrive Alive, drive sober.
Our sun is one.
My father was one.
I am one.
Are you one?
Hi, I'm Wayne Harding, and I'm the president of the Rotary Club of Peterborough. Rotary is proudly celebrating 100 years of service in our community. You're watching Your TV Peterborough, truly local.
Welcome back, everyone, to YourVote 2021. And now we are going to allow Judy Forbes to ask a question to candidate of her choice, as we did earlier.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Roderick. Mr. Schmale, where do you stand on the proposition from your party leader that our universal healthcare system should allow a parallel private system for those who can afford to pay, thus weakening universal healthcare as it has happened to the National Healthcare Service in the UK? Do you believe that most voters in this riding can afford to pay thousands of dollars more so that they can be bumped up for, say, a hip replacement? And have you considered the implications for the less well-off in this riding who will face even longer wait lists?
Okay, thank you very much for the question. As my leader has said, we support a universal healthcare system. We support investments into the healthcare system. As mentioned, $60 billion more within the next 10 years, an increase of 3 to 6% of transfer payments to the provinces to directly into the healthcare system, so they can not only adjust what areas need the most amount of effort or assistance, but also the predictability into the long term, so they know exactly how much they will be getting, so they can predict and plan into the future. What I think my colleague is also referring to is the doctored video that the finance minister sadly put out over social media, using that doctored video, taking out key parts of my leader's speech that specifically referred to his commitment to the universal healthcare system. And then the finance minister then went on to speak to it as if it was actually true.
It was she posted the full speech of Aaron O'Toole's.
And then you saw the part where he committed to Canada's universal healthcare system.
But he also said he would like to see the private healthcare step up in an innovative way.
Well, Ms.
I'd
Forbes,
like to know
30% of healthcare in this country already. 30% of healthcare already in this country is done by the private sector. You go for blood work, it's done by the private sector. Some scans, it's done by the private sector. We want to invest in the public healthcare system. And if there are ways there could be synergies, we should look at them. But a lot of that has to do with the provinces, not the federal government. That's up to the provinces where they direct their money. And at the end of the day, we want to ensure that wait lists are as low as possible, that people are getting the care that they need and deserve.
But we also want to make sure that the wealthy are not buying their way to the top of the wait list. It would if you've got private
But who
folks
said that?
doing.
See, again, you're using a doctored video to make it as if it's
It was not doctored.
true.
It was fully
I
available
don't know how you
on
can
the
doctor
Twitter
a video
feed.
and use it as
Available.
truth. That doesn't make any sense.
It was fully available, and Chrystia Freeland was exonerated.
The system in the universal healthcare system, 3 to 6% increase, the provinces decide how they work those dollars.
The Conservatives have a history of privatizing healthcare, as we've seen in the province with long-term care.
Really? So 15 years of Liberal rule in Ontario, and you're saying there was no expansion to private healthcare. I bet you Zach Miller has an alternate view on that.
Exactly, and I just want to butt in here. The Liberal candidate is saying she's the beacon of public healthcare. But if you recall earlier in the debate, she mentioned that when we need a pharmacare program, we need to expand pharmaceutical companies' control in delivering that. That doesn't sound like public healthcare to me. That sounds like shifting it back over to the private sphere while seniors and working families are left in the dust, unable to fill their prescription drugs. So
that is called saving the taxpayers' money.
No, it's not. So while pharmaceutical companies are raking in the profits,
you're like, oh, that's pharmaceutical companies.
You're like, to all the people that don't have
insurance companies who are helping their employees.
Yeah, and the insurance companies are by design not to pay people anything. So don't say that you're the beacon of public health care when you want to expand private interests and insurance companies, which their entire goal is just to not pay people, even though they're just raking in the profits,
not to pay people.
Well, as a former banker, maybe you would side with that, but as a working individual, as a student, as a person who is left behind in the economy that your government created over the last 10 decades, 15, 20 years, I don't think the Liberals have a leg to stand on in that regard.
All right, thank you, Zach. And Zach, I'm going to turn this over to you to ask a question to the candidate of your choice, either Judy Forbes or Jamie Schmill.
So I will ask mine to Jamie this time. Thanks for asking me a question the last time. I'll pay it back to you. Recently, the Conservative Party released their housing plan, and part of that aspect was selling off 15% of publicly owned land. When we're in a climate crisis, when we are lacking green space in our communities, that affects not only the culture but the well-being of individuals. How can you rationalize selling off 15% of our land to private developers, earning them money, but not necessarily producing affordable homes for our community?
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. I think as we both, Zach and I had mentioned earlier, the issue in a lot of cases is supply. We both talked about earlier about getting shovels in the ground. Yes, we differ on who does that and how that gets done, but the main issue is to get that supply on the market so that we can start to cool this housing market, which is driving those on the lower end out of the reality of home ownership. And like I said in our closing remarks during the last debate, I think we all have a vision of what we want Canada to be, prosperous and free, but we have different ways of getting there. And though we all differ on that, but we do agree on the common problem is that we need to increase the supply. The other issue that we're seeing is with all the printed money that's being made right now, the cost of housing is a major, there's a coalition here. If you own a mansion, you're doing probably very well. If you're trying to get into the market, you're probably hurting and can't find a place to go. And it's also, as Ms. Forbes mentioned, it also hurts the rental market too, because now you have landlords that have seen a dramatic increase in their property and either sell in many cases or do other things with it because they can get top dollar in many cases. And without those rental units coming on board, again, you are creating a massive demand problem, but not addressing the supply side. And of course, the rental market is provincial and there are different issues that the provinces have to do. But at the end of the day, we do need to get these houses built and we do need to work with the provinces and municipalities in order to get that done.
Okay, Jamie, since you brought up, owning a home is out of reach due to prices skyrocketing, let's reset your time clock and have you kick off this round of questions on affordable houses for working class and even young middle class Canadians. What plan, maybe beyond what you've already said, does your party have to alleviate the housing crisis?
Yeah, the other one is to ban foreign ownership of homes. We know starting out west in the greater Vancouver area, that's where it started. People were buying real estate, many cases leaving them empty, as a way to, in some cases, launder money or even hide their money in a safe jurisdiction in Toronto. Of course, the province of Vancouver and the city implemented some measures to start to cool that, but that just shifted it over to the Toronto area. And then, of course, the pandemic, people want a better quality of life. They don't want to be in a 600 square foot apartment, so they come to Paradise and around to start to live. And rightfully so, I don't blame them. But it also, until we're putting that supply and working with the provinces and municipalities to eliminate barriers to these homes being built, it's very hard to cool off that market. Again, we should tighten the money supply as well. The more we print, the more this is going to get worse.
Okay, Thanks, Jamie. Judy, I'm going to turn to you now. Aside from affordable housing, how can your party help the middle-class Canadians who are finding that home buying opportunity just out of reach?
You know, it's interesting, Roderick. I have adult children who are looking to get into the housing market, and it's difficult. A couple of them are trying to get into the housing market in Toronto, which is absolutely exorbitantly priced. And we're seeing prices go up here in Haliburton, Kawartha Lakes, Brock as well, mainly because people are cashing in on the high value of their home in the GTA and finding a nice home here that's maybe twice the size for the same amount of money. And so it's driving housing costs up here as well. And so that leaves the locals kind of out of luck, which is a challenge. So as your next member of Parliament, it would be my honor to go to the government to ensure that a lot of the funds come into this area to help those people build new homes, create new homes. And so that, you know, we all know the supply and demand curve. If the supply goes up, the cost of housing goes down. And that is really what we need in this riding, is to build more homes so that people can afford them. So, and possibly, you know, renovate buildings that have gone empty for whatever reason, and just to help these folks get into the housing market.
Thank you, Judy. And Zach Miller, what plan does your party have to alleviate the housing crisis for working class and middle class Canadians?
For sure. And I mean, not to mention the supply issue that we've all outlined here, as well as the CMHC. I think what we need to do is give more money to some folks to enter that market if they're able to afford a home. I think the government needs to step in and allow and give them money to help pay for closing costs or a down payment of 5 or 10% that they might have. But it's also looking at the CMHC and allowing for 30-year mortgages again, so that monthly mortgage payments are not skyrocketing, are not unaffordable, and that we give them a little bit of a break to buy a home. But just remember, when we do look at housing, we have to look at it as a total package. And when we see governments promising big new spending programs like the National Housing Strategy that the Liberals implemented in 2015, it's nothing but hogwash, so to speak. 40% of that money goes to interest payments, much more of it goes to developers, and only a small percentage goes to building homes. So the reason why our homes, our single detached homes that middle-class families so often desire, with a yard for their children to play in a nice community, the reason why it's so hard is because we have a federal government that isn't on the side of you, where they're not there to make sure that you're able to afford a home. They're there to make sure that developers and the large corporations are making their profit, because those are the folks that the government of the Liberals and Conservatives see as running the economy. And that's not how an economy is supposed to work, and that's not a healthy it's not a healthy economy by any stretch of the matter.
Thanks, Zach. Judy, you may have 30 seconds.
So we're talking about the National Housing Strategy. So the Liberal government is doubling down on the National Housing Strategy, and the budget commits $2.5 billion to create 35,000 affordable housing units. $1.5 billion is dedicated to our rapid housing initiative. So we are pushing forward with tangible work with the National Housing Strategy.
So of that $2.5 billion that she outlines, just think about $1.2 billion of that money goes into interest payments and not into building homes that will help middle class.
You know what? I'd fact check that one. I'd fact check.
Well,
that may
do a Google search,
may be
it's
Facebook
right on
news.
there.
That may be.
It's not Facebook news. I'm an educated person, and I know how to do a Google search.
Thank you both. Jamie Schmel, you may now ask your second question to the candidate of your choice for this debate.
Sure, I'll do Ms. Forbes, since I did Mr. Miller just a second ago. Ms. Forbes, as a former banker, we're watching as the government of Canada spends $424 million per day, more than what's taking in. The Parliamentary Budget Officer says the Canadian budget will not be balanced on this current path until 2070. We've already surpassed 1.2 trillion in national debt. Inflation is up, the highest it's been in 20 years, driving up the cost of everything, and it's only going to get worse. Yes, when the governments told people to stay home at the beginning of the pandemic, stay safe, stay home, they should be compensated, businesses and individuals. And that spending package passed unanimously in the House of Commons. It's all the other spending that is couched in the language of COVID that has absolutely nothing to do with COVID that is causing a lot of this extra spending that is anticipated. So going to my beginning, as a former banker, does this not concern you?
Debt is always a concern. Debt is always a concern for bankers. But debt is in relation to how much you make. As an individual, the amount of debt I carry is in relation to how much I make. As a country, our debt is in relation to our GDP. And Canada has the second best debt to GDP ratio after COVID. The only one that has a better debt to GDP ratio is Germany. So of the G7 countries, we have the second best debt to GDP ratio. And that is what economists look at when they are determining whether we can take on more debt. We are a wealthy country. We cannot allow people to go hungry in this country. We cannot allow people to have to choose between getting their medication and getting their food. We have to find programs to help people move forward from this pandemic. On the actual debt amount, Maclean's magazine recently indicated that the conservative debt and the liberal debt that we're prophesizing are close enough to be equal. So your party is suggesting that you are going to balance the budget in 10 years. I'll tell you, as a banker, nobody forecasts more than 5 years. You cannot imagine what can happen in 10 years. 2 years ago, we couldn't imagine COVID-19. So it is a fairy tale to forecast 10 years out and say you can balance the budget on a 3% growth. That's just fairy dust.
Thanks, Judy. You want 30 seconds on that, Jamie?
I don't even know where to start that. But yes, we have a plan to get the budget balanced within 10 years. And we've said that. And yes, we are spending now because the pandemic's not over yet and we want to get out safely. Also, the path that we're talking about, the 2070, what the parliamentary budget officer said, that's a path minus any blips, minus any recessions, any slowdowns, any rise to any interest rate. 2070, more debt. And when we talk about we don't want to see anyone go hungry, inflation is skyrocketing right now and only going to get worse. You're going to hurt those that are the most vulnerable.
Okay, thank you, Jamie. Let's move on to childcare. A national childcare program continues to be discussed to help lower the costs for families who need it. Tell us how your party can make a difference here. Zach.
Like provinces like Quebec, I think we need to take a direction from them and implement a $10 a day childcare plan so that no family is worrying about paying that bill on top of every other bill that's piling up at home. But in order to address this, and make it a reality, make $10 a day childcare a reality, we have to build adequate space so that families have the space, families have the support when they need it, right? So, and it also goes into making sure that we have a work staff. The workers in those facilities are paid a fair wage, are paid a living wage. I mean, my sister is an ECE and her wage as an ECE, taking care of children and educating them in their most formative years, she's not paid much more than minimum wage, and that's an abomination on a system that when we're supposed to care for a child and educate them before going into the public education system is just absolutely crazy. But even after we look at childcare, we have to look at the supports that are there for those that need it most. We need a robust national strategy and national action plan based around needs-based therapy for children with autism, so that they can get the supports that they need, individualized to their needs. And I think that's often lost. I think we need to care for a child at their beginning from age 1 to 3, but also carrying that forward and having leadership from the federal government so that no child is left behind in school and no child is living a life that of not their full potential. So I think that would be an NDP plan and completely achievable.
Thank you, Zach. Let's go over to Jamie. National Child Care Program. What do the Conservatives plan on doing?
All right. Childcare is definitely an issue no matter where you go, I think, in this country. I remember when my son was born 10 years ago, I went out that very afternoon to go register for a childcare spot because I knew the wait list was that long that we had to wait. So it is an issue. Our plan starts to address some of that because not every situation is a one-size-fits-all scenario. Some people use family members. Some people use a neighborhood daycare. Some people use a traditional institutionalized daycare. I did that. Our plan is to give parents that flexibility. Up to 75% of those expenses will be refundable at tax time. Letting people choose a wide variety of options, which best works for them on how you're going to do that. So that way you're not disenfranchising the shift worker that is outside the 9 to 5, the 10 to 6, the 8 to 4, giving that flexibility and that choice to the parents on how best they want their children raised.
Thanks, Jamie. And lastly, Judy, on national childcare.
Well, I think most people know the Liberal government has been pushing forward with $10 a day childcare. We have signed agreements with 8 of the provinces and 1 territory so far in order to allow women who would like to go back to work the flexibility to go back to work. In recognition that many families are struggling with a wide range of expenses during COVID, families entitled to the Canada Child Benefit are receiving additional temporary support of up to $1,200 for each child under the age of 6 through the Canada Child Benefit. And the Canada Child Benefit has been phenomenal in helping families cope with the costs of raising children and the costs of childcare. We're also indexing payments for the Canada Child Benefit. So, for example, a single mother of 2 aged children, 3 and 5, whose net income in 2020 was $32,000, will receive a maximum Canada Child Benefit amount of $13,666 tax-free. So, for those people who need more, there is more money available to help them.
Thank you, Judy. The rising costs of food is becoming a real issue for people who have lower incomes. How does your party plan to get this under control? Judy, let's go back to you.
In my mind, Roderick, it's not food insecurity, but actually financial insecurity, financial inequity. There is a rising cost for food these days. There is rising costs for a lot of things, and many of them were a result of COVID and delays because of COVID. And so we are seeing increased costs. But it's not that there isn't enough food in this country to feed people. There is enough food to feed people in this country. What there isn't enough of is income equity, which takes us back to the discussion that we had not that long ago on universal basic income and how to help people have the money in order to be able to buy the food that we need. The other part of food supply is agriculture. And, we are working diligently with our farmers, with our aquaculture folks in order to come up with new and innovative ways to grow food in this country. We are we're a summer season growing country. So how do we expand our growing seasons? How do we use green technology to grow foods? We're working diligently with our agriculture and supply management folks in order to get more food to market.
Thank you. Zach Miller.
So when we are talking about food insecurity, like Judy said, we do have ample supply of food in some degree. We just don't have the income supports. And addressing food insecurity is one of the social determinants of health. It is what makes folks less healthy if they don't have access to nutritional food. And a way we address this is by opening up communications and partnerships with our local community producers. This meaning having free school lunches for children, right? And that can be provided by local producers in each economy. And that's, opening up communications and dialogue between producers, municipalities, provincial and federal governments. That is a giant step forward that hasn't occurred. But also addressing agriculture in general. I mean, some farmers that I've talked to over the last 6-7 years are cash strapped. They don't have some of the income to expand their facility, to keep up with rising costs elsewhere. So we need to make sure that they have income supports and that when they do decide to pass their land and farm over to the next generation, that they have the supports needed to be successful in their operations. And I just want to make clear that some of the reasons why we see food insecurity is because of the increasing globalization of our economy, right? Once we signed free trade deals in the 90s and continuing on, both liberal and conservative governments, it's always been at the detriment of our agricultural sector. It's always been at the detriment of that. When we re-ratified NAFTA, it was the dairy industry that was impacted. When we first signed NAFTA in the 90s, it was the pork industry that was affected. So we really need to look at how our economy works. We need to look at what can be better and making sure that we are not, subsidizing production of food from other countries and start looking within.
Thank you, Jamie. Thank you, Zach.
Perfect. On the specific issue of grocery store prices, we are going to increase the maximum fine for price fixing, which we know has been an issue for many, many years. We're going to increase it from 24 million to 100 million. And then we're going to introduce actual criminal penalties for executives who are caught in that collusion of price fixing. We're also going to bring in a tough code of conduct to protect suppliers and promote grocery competition. And as well, we're actually going to give those laws real teeth to actually deter an impediment to those that are thinking of doing such a practice that hurt Canadians as a whole. And we're also going to stand up to corporate Canada and say no to mergers that result in job losses or increased prices, specifically when it comes to food. On the income side, I've said it a million times, inflation is up in August, 4.1%. One of the 4 biggest price increases has been on the price of food, hurting those on the most vulnerable, hurting the lower middle class, less discretionary spending, less ability to go out and create economic opportunity, because we all know the bills get paid first in many cases, and then the discretionary spending is maybe going to a restaurant, going to a movie, buying something, going on vacation, what have you. That is impacted. That has a direct result in the slowdown of the economy and businesses' ability to hire and create wealth and opportunity in our communities.
Thanks, Jamie.
Roderick, can I just speak to Zach's comment on tariffs and the...
Yes, 30 seconds only, yes.
30 seconds, okay. So Canada did make arrangements, have arrangements with different partners. So we now have tariff-free access to 1.5 billion consumers around the world. Some of those arrangements were detrimental to different agricultural sectors, and the Liberal government is compensating our dairy egg farmers for that. So.
Okay, thank you, Judy. I believe now we are at our closing remarks.
Ooh.
And in reverse order, that means, Judy, you're up first.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. You've all listened carefully to what each party is offering in exchange for your precious vote. And as you consider in the days to come which party and candidate you will support, I will ask you to think about which of the main parties is the most civil in its discourse on social media and in the House of Commons, because that matters. Particularly when we view in horror the growing incivility and vitriol on social media and the recent behavior of some protesters towards our Prime Minister. That's just not our Canada. It's not our Canada. It's not how we do business. So also, please consider which of the current parties has proven the strongest leadership in the federal government? Which party has kept us safe and secure during the worst global pandemic that we have seen since 1918? Which party has the most ambitious, the most widely praised plan to tackle climate change? Which party has a fully costed, publicly available plan for its broad and ambitious agenda? Which party is working to keep us safe from mass killings, made a strong stand against assault weapons and wants to do more? And which federal party has consistently over the years done more for the poor, the middle class, the disabled, the veterans, the elderly, the Indigenous, peoples, youth, women, refugees, and all communities, regardless of age, race, or sexual orientation? There's only one answer. It's the Liberal Party of Canada. And I respectfully ask for your vote on September the 20th. Thank you.
Thank you, Judy. And now we will turn to Jamie Schmell for his closing statement.
Thank you very much, Chair. First of all, I want to thank YourTV for putting on this debate. It's a great setup, and despite the pandemic, I think a great format and a great ability to talk about the issues. Also to the volunteers working the cameras, the paid staff, to you, Chair, for moderating this debate, and to my fellow panelists. I know it hasn't been a traditional campaign, but it's been fun seeing familiar faces, as well to our support staff who work so hard to make sure that we're on task. This election is a choice between a comprehensive Conservative plan to deliver jobs for all Canadians and restore public finances versus a plan that has us on the path to more spending, higher taxes, and more unemployment. Who do you trust to manage Canada's economy? Who do you trust to get Canada out of this recession? The Conservatives are the only alternative to this path. We have a plan to restore good governance, secure the future in terms of the economy, transparency and accountability, bring that back to government, and ensure that Canada is never unprepared for a crisis again. So with the Canadian Economic Recovery Plan, we have a 5-point plan to secure jobs. We talked about many issues today about how we're going to actually secure the jobs, bring those dollars back to the main street and inject that economic activity back into our small businesses. Securing accountability, ensuring that we bring in tough new anti-corruption laws to clean up the mess in Ottawa. Securing mental health, making sure that mental health is treated as healthcare and funded appropriately. Securing our country, bringing back manufacturing to Canada. I think this pandemic has shown how dependent we are to one country in particular that has been a very bad actor in this whole pandemic. Not to mention the way it's treating 3 Canadian prisoners right now. We want to ensure that we are able to produce what we need, but also make new arrangements with the like-minded countries. I specifically mention often the continent of Africa because it is a massive opportunity for economic collaboration, whether it be agriculture, tourism, and the list goes on. We need to expand those and ensure that we are turning our back to the bad actors. We're also going to secure Canada's economy. As we talked about, getting people back to work safely and responsibly, ensuring that our businesses are solid as they do so. So I humbly ask for your support on September 20th for low taxes, less government, and more freedom. Thank you.
Thank you, Jamie. We now turn to Zach Miller for your final statement.
Thank you, Roderick. So over the course of this debate, I've outlined a very comprehensive way that we can make your lives more affordable, putting more money back into your pocket. And it's pretty evident where my principles lie. I mean, I am working minimum wage right now while going through school. I'm going to have about $45,000 in debt. So I can empathize with the debt loads that working families are dealing with right now, what seniors are dealing with right now. And addressing pharmacare and dental care, as well as our environment, plays a giant role in making sure that we have social justice in our economy. We really have to look at who our economy works for. I know I've said it over and over again in this debate, but our economy is fundamentally structured to benefit the wealthy, to benefit large corporations, to benefit pharmaceutical companies, and even shareholders of long-term care while families are grieving and residents are unfortunately dying. But an issue that we haven't quite discussed yet is a very important one that I'm hearing at the doors quite a lot, and it is Indigenous relations and the federal government's role in that. And I think we need to elect representatives around this country and elect a federal government that doesn't pick and choose which rights to uphold. We need to once and for all, implement the Truth and Reconciliations Commission 94 calls to reconciliation and adapt the United Nations Declaration of Human Rights, Rights of Indigenous Peoples. Because for far too long, we have been neglecting this issue, and the federal government has been picking and choosing which ones to uphold. We need to find every lost child that was a victim to the genocide that occurred in the residential school systems and hold accountable the governments and churches that were responsible in that conduct, in that genocide, sorry. So I think there's a lot of work that needs to be done. On September 20th, I will be your advocate if you vote for me and send me to Ottawa. I have your concerns top of mind because I am you. So on September 20th, I pledge all the things I've outlined this afternoon to you, and I will never stop fighting for you. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Zach. That's all the time we have today. It's been a great debate. We hope this has given you an opportunity to learn more about your federal candidates and the parties they represent. For Your Vote 2021, I'm Roderick Benz, publisher of the Lindsay Advocate, urging you to take the time to vote so that your voice is heard. So long, everyone.
We are your TV. Connect with us. Your TV. Truly local.
Hi, I'm Coralie Jacobs, the Manager of Development with Easter Seals, Ontario. You're watching Your TV, truly local.